Welcome to St. Aloysius Church. It's the 21st of June, and in most of the Catholic churches across the world, they'll be celebrating the 12th Sunday of the year, and the Gospel will be Matthew's Gospel. But because the 21st of June is also the feast day of St. Aloysius, his patronal feast takes precedence over this Sunday. So our readings today will be more readings about the life of Aloysius. Aloysius was a Jesuit saint. He died when he was 21, and he grew up in northern Italy. The Gonzaga family, he's Aloysius Gonzaga. The Gonzaga family, one of the great powerful families of northern Italy at that time. The Gonzagas even referenced as a play within a play in Shakespeare's Hamlet. Aloysius, that's the Latin name, but he was probably known by the family as Luigi, was a young man who grew up and was the eldest son, and he was expected to inherit the great wealth and the power and the influence of the Gonzagas. And in many ways, Luigi was cultured and tutored accordingly. There are stories of him and his father taking great pride in him, dressing him up as a 6-year-old in a suit of armor which had been made specially for him. And as it was remembered, he marched up and down with the soldiers, but also it was remembered that his mother was not terribly impressed with the way he'd also picked up some of the language of the soldiers as well. But Luigi had a different agenda. As time went on, as those early years went on, when he was still only 8 or 9 years old, he started to realize that he was being called in a different direction. He was being called to pray. He was being called to be in the presence of God. And the various things that were going on in the Gonzaga family, the power, the influence, the intrigue, were not things that he was interested in. He wanted, and he expressed this to his father when he was 16-year-old, that he wanted to become a Jesuit. The father was furious, and he threatened to have him horsewhipped. Once he'd calmed down, he realized that maybe persuasion was the best way. So he sent Luigi and his younger brother Rudolfo off to the various courts in Italy to try and experience all of the great things that were there. But Luigi came back and was still determined. He wanted to become a priest, and he wanted to be a Jesuit priest. So eventually his father rescinded and allowed him to go. Writing to Father General, Aloysius' father wrote to Father General saying, "I'm giving you my most precious possession." Today's gospel is from the beginnings of John's gospel. Let's listen to that now.
A reading from the Gospel of John, Chapter 1, verses 35 to 39. The next day, John the Baptist again was standing with 2 of his disciples, and as he watched Jesus walk by, he exclaimed, "Look, here is the Lamb of God." The 2 disciples heard him say this, and they followed Jesus. When Jesus turned and saw them following, he said to them, "What are you looking for?" They said to him, "Rabbi," which translated means teacher, "where are you staying?" He said to them, "Come and see." They came and saw where he was staying, and they remained with him that day. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
In the novitiate, Aloysius was able to ask that question of Jesus, "Where do you live?" And then to spend that time trying to know who Jesus was. He took vows after 2 years in the Jesuit novitiate, and then began his studies for theology, and eventually he would be moving towards priesthood. But plague broke out in Rome, and the various Jesuit scholastics and those in formation started to help with the hospitals that were growing up to try and help plague victims despite the virulence of the disease. Luigi's health had never been very good, and so his superior felt that he really shouldn't minister frontline to the plague victims. But Aloysius was determined. He wanted to do that. He knew that his father could be persistent, and he knew that superiors could be persistent, but he pushed. But the superior said, no, you should go to a different hospital and try to help other people who were there. He did that, but ironically, one of the people that he was helping and bathing and feeding happened to have plague. And Aloysius succumbed to the plague at the grand old age of 21. I come to the back of St. Aloysius Church, where we have this wonderful picture of St. Therese of Lisieux, Carmelite saint from the late 19th century. She, like Aloysius, died young. She was 24 when she died. The symbolisms, though, are something to look at. The symbolism here of Therese is she's holding some roses because she's known as the little flower. If you look at, and you saw the statue of Aloysius at the beginning, he's standing there holding a lily. The lily is a symbol of innocence. All very nice, but the problem is, for Aloysius and for Therese, we sometimes turn them into plaster cast saints. We think of them as, we can corral them in some way, we can make them seem nice and holy and prayerful, but that's not what they were like. Therese was wonderfully feisty. You can see it in her autobiography. She has a powerful, insightful, energetic heart, a great sense of humor, somebody who was had spark and energy and edge to her. Luigi Gonzaga was just like that. The problem is, though, we have him as a picture of a rather simpering saint, but he was anything but that. He was tough, he was hard, and yet he was somebody who was looking to find God in his life. The problem with the way we treat the saints sometimes is that we try to turn them into something pious, which they were not. We try and take St. Peter, who was a wonderfully edgy fisherman, and turning him into some great academic, which he wasn't. So as we celebrate this feast day today, perhaps it's important to remember that all of those saints that we have as our patrons are not something corralled, not something boxed up, nicely packaged, as we in some ways can do with our statues, whether it's for Therese or whether it's for Aloysius. Let us remember that the Spirit of God acts in human beings, and it's those very three-dimensional, at times broken human beings that are people trying to earth God in their lives, to put down roots of God in their lives. It's being human and trying to find God that makes them saints. Let's try to do that for ourselves, to be human and to find God.